All right, let's do this. I've got with me, and I apologize right off the bat, my friend. Could you pronounce your name for me? And just to be clear, it's not your name. I mispronounce everybody's name. Tell people who
No,
you
no,
are
no,
and what you do within the W3C.
I've been living on this side of the Atlantic far enough that I know that's difficult for people around here to pronounce my name. My name is Philippe Le Garé. Uh, uh, yes, I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Boston, and as you can see, I do not have a Bostonian accent.
You do not. I
No,
noticed this.
no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I started to work for W3C actually while I was in France, back in the early days of the web. My role at W3C is to manage our working groups. So we have more than 30 working groups at W3C and working on all kind of areas, or whether it's HTML, CSS, web payments, automotive, electronic books, fonts, graphics, you name it.
Everything.
We have a lot of groups. It's not quite everything, but it covers quite a
That's a
large
lot. That's a lot.
a large range that keeps me busy. And one of those groups is creating controversy nowadays.
I noticed. I noticed a
Obviously.
little bit of controversy. Weird how that happens. So, all right, let's dive into that straight off. And by the way, I really appreciate you being here because I think this is going to be really helpful. We want to make sure there's lots of good open communication on all this so everyone understands what's happening.
Yes. No, I really wanted to do this because, I mean, we care about the web, and the fact that you are upset is something that I can certainly understand because we care about this. It's very important. And I mean, as Tim Berners-Lee said, the web is for everyone. So we try to give as many voices as possible to the entire community as well. Right. And the free software community is an important component of the web community.
We're certainly a very loud component. That's for darn sure. We speak up really quickly when we start to get cranky about something. So we're kind of like the canary in the coal mines in that way. All right.
Yes.
So encrypted media extensions. What I would love is, could you give me like the elevator pitch for it? Because I've read all of the documents and I'm having a hard time getting behind it, and I know I'm not alone on that. And so I'm hoping that maybe you could give like a short why you think it's a good idea, sort of a pitch to kind of help people feel a little more comfortable with the idea.
Yes. So I think this idea came back. It goes back in the very early days of the web, where we've been working on extending the web platform, the web itself. Back then, I remember being in meetings in the early 2000s about how can we allow those extensions, and we have to realize that for quite a while, one of the best way, or rather, way to extend the web was to use plugins.
Right.
And video did not come built in web browsers. I mean, the success of platforms like YouTube, what you and I are able to do today, 5 years ago, we would not have been able to do that without using a plugin in the web browser. And very in the early days, we've been wondering how can we either interact better with plugins on the web. And that debate kind of like shifted in the mid 2000, around 2005, I would say, where suddenly it was no longer how can we interact with those plugins, but how can we replace them? How can we map the web platform much better for with features? And there are people who can. There is certainly a debate, and we don't have to go into that one about is it necessarily a good thing to extend the web in all of those areas?
Right.
We can have that debate. We are focusing on one particular feature today, but I'm sure we can. I mean, I can propose some similar debates on other features as well.
Yes, for sure.
Including CSS. So
that's a debate I wouldn't mind having someday, but yes.
Yes, one debate at a time.
One at a time.
So one of those features was video support. I mean, the Flash plugin in particular was very successful in bringing video support on the web. That made success for platforms such as YouTube. Without plugins like Flash, YouTube would not be around because we would not have access to video as we have today. So the goal was to build support for video directly into the web, so we can make it a first-class citizen of the web, such as it was done for images, where you can, to put an image on a web page, you push the link to it, and here you go, you have an image. Nowadays, you can do the same thing with video. But soon after that, the television industry got interested in using the web platform. The thread of smart television was coming along, and they were like, geez, we have use cases, and can we see how to address them? Whether it's to allow you to control a web application using a TV remote, do live streamings, and for better or for worse, protected content as well. And that's how the use case came from this industry. And again, the spirit here is kind of like, how can we, this feature was deployed in the plugins for quite a long time, and was there a way to replace it? If we really wanted to get rid of plugins on the web, the motto was like, we need to find a replacement for it. So that was certainly one of the motivation behind that, to replace plugins and provide better alternative to plugins. Plugins over time have been getting older and older and created a lot and more privacy and security issues for users. I remember, one browser maker telling me that most of their security issues that they were encountering nowadays were related to plugins. So it was also becoming for the browser makers to find a way to get rid of the plugins so that they do not have to basically lose the control of what the users is doing on the web as well.
Okay.
So that was certainly a major motivation. A second one was integration with the web platform as well. Is kind of in the year 2012, 2013, there was a separate movement that came up called the extensible web, where the philosophy, and which is still very active today, is what are the necessary features that we need to provide to the platform so that you can build on top of it.
Okay.
And so there were through a list of necessary features, and obviously interaction with various components available on the user device was important, and one of those components was the DRM system for those. And finally, the third point I would say was the interoperability. We want this work to work for everyone, and so that was certainly a major driver into our reasoning in terms of the high level points.
Sure. Okay, I kind of get all of that. I've got a couple of more specific questions to get into, but I want to start with something kind of more high level. From your standpoint, would you consider DRM as a general thing to be a good thing? Like from your standpoint and from the W3C standpoint, is it a good thing, or like where does it fall on the spectrum of good v evil?
DRM system do have issues, both at the technical and at the regulation level, and no one is going to deny that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, including in the television industry. They won't tell you that DRM is the best thing in the world by far. I mean, it does provide some restrictions on the users that are very annoying for them.
Yeah.
I mean, just from the point of view of the user experience, if you were going to ask me, well, this is not a good user experience. I'm sorry.
Right.
Especially in today's life, where we have people who have several devices in their home, and they want to be able to watch the content on whatever devices they have without any barrier to that. So
I know it's a tricky question. I know.
No,
It's simple, but it's tricky. I get it.
Now, one of the things that I want to make it clear here is the misunderstanding that people have of the EME solution.
Right.
And that's what was disturbing me the most with your question, is that there seems to be some belief that EME is about and only about DRM, and that's not true at all. It's not a DRM. EME is not a DRM system, and you have to understand how we architecture those stuff a little bit. So
just to be clear, what would EME be used for that's not DRM related?
So EME itself is an API, a JavaScript API for protected content. And its main use case is to interact with underlying DRM system.
Right.
Now, it is not bound to any particular DRM system. It does not recommend any particular or required any particular DRM system. It's
agnostic of the DRM system itself, but it's an API set that allows you to integrate DRM systems into the browser.
If you wish to, yes. So like some of the browsers will allow you to, who supports EME, will allow you to disable the underlying DRM systems. And I do that myself. Right. Just because you're using EME doesn't mean that you are forced to use a DRM system. So that's one point about EME. The other thing, and the fact that it's agnostics, mean that if a new idea come up to, a better DRM system come up tomorrow, we would not have to rewrite EME at all. I mean, at its basis, what EME does is it takes messages coming from the web, it's passing them along in the underlying system, with, by the way, some magic. I can come back to that, and expect the DRM expect that subsystem to do the right thing with the content. That's what DME is at. Now, in terms of required, what people also missed is there is actually one protection system required by EME, and that's what we call the clear key system, which is defined by a set of standards at the ATF. And therefore, some of the television companies would tell you, or movie companies would tell you, sorry, but it's not good enough for our own purposes. But that could be implemented in open source and free software for sure. So if you really want to guarantee that that your content would be able to be played on every single system that supports EME, the only system that provides that guarantees is a clear key system. Okay. Effectively.
I get that.
And whether you want to use it or not is your own choice. That would be up to you. Some television consortium in the UK, for example, are interested in doing it because they don't see a premium value in the content that they produce necessarily. Right. Sometimes the time to live for the value of this content is relatively short. Yeah. And they're perfectly fine to use that system. Of course, when we talk about Hollywood movies, the different.
I get it. They want it to be. They want to feel like they're protected, even if. I mean, realistically, we know, and I know that DRM. Yes. There hasn't been an effective DRM solution implemented to date. In terms of actually protecting the content. They always get broken. They've never not been broken.
And they know that.
And they all know that. And so it's more about a feeling of protectiveness more than anything else, it seems like.
It's about like they don't make it. It's how hard they want to make it for the user to go. Yeah. To go and do these kind of things. And by the way, EME is not the only technique that you can use to do that.
No. But it's clearly so. EME, was clearly designed for that purpose. That was its purpose. Yes. It's for encrypted content. Knowing what you've said so far and what I've heard from other W3C members, I haven't heard from anyone at the W3C who's come out and said that having large amounts of encrypted content, having a DRM solutions in our browsers is an inherently wonderful thing. Like I've yet to hear anyone say how great it is. It sounds like and this might be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like people are saying this is a bad thing, but we're creating a system to try and make this bad thing a little bit better. That's kind of how it feels.
Well, as I said at the beginning, prior to that, the only way you had to do that was to use plugins, and plugins were not only embedding DRM system, but much larger kind of systems, and you had no control at all about what the system was using, was doing.
I agree.
EME is isolating that particular component, so that trying to reduce what the black box does was one of the motivation. But at the end of the day, from our point of view, it was to enable a particular use case. I mean, today, if I want to use, if I want to see a movie or television series, like for example on Netflix, what are my choices, and what is the solution that is going to provide me the best protection in terms of security, privacy, and where I'm not forced to install some kind of like native application on my phone that is going to have access to my contact on Xbox.
I'm with you on that, but that makes an assumption, and what you're saying is right on the face of it, but that does make the assumption that Netflix is a good example. I mean, Netflix wrote part of the specification for EME. They're one of the editors of the document. They're clearly a driving force behind it, but that makes the assumption that Netflix couldn't ever possibly on planet Earth be persuaded to not use a DRM solution.
No, that's not true.
If they could be persuaded, it seems like the W3C has clout. The W3C has gravitas. When nerds around the world, including the developers at Netflix, hear from the W3C and hear from the knighted Sir Tim Berners-Lee, it makes us take a step back, and we hold it in a very high regard. And so I know that at least at certain levels, even within Netflix, Google, Microsoft, the companies who have really been the driving force of the EME, at least according to the document, I know that they would at least take listen to that if the W3C set came out and said, look, we don't think this should be a standard. We don't think this should be part of the web. We don't think that encrypting images and videos and the like is conducive to a free and open web. Let's find another way together. There might be pushback. In fact, there would be pushback. Sure, there'd be pushback. But if anyone could make that change, if anyone appears to be that shining knight on the hill, it is Tim and the rest of the W3C, and that in part is what bums me out the most about this. Is it seems like there was an opportunity there and we missed it.
And some people are disappointed by that, and I can understand that for sure. I mean, and to some extent, I'm sorry we couldn't provide something better in terms of that. I mean, we tried to find some consensus around our members. As you know, the EFF has been proposing a covenant to do that, and we did not manage to find a common ground with enough members behind it to actually support it. Part of it was because, and I can go into more details about those issues with the covenant, but we tried for several months to find you have to realize that the EME specification has been already, technically speaking, it hasn't changed for more than a year and a half.
Yeah, it's been around.
And since then, what we've been trying to find is to resolve those issues. And the EFF proposed a covenant. Some of our members proposed some alternative that was not acceptable to either side. Earlier this year, we proposed, we looked into, instead of necessarily impacting the regulations, maybe we can get companies such as Google, Microsoft, and so on to change the way they approach the protection of security researchers, what are called in disclosure programs that those companies have. Surprisingly, actually, and I was the one who did this research. Surprisingly, you'll if you do the research a little bit, you'll notice that actually Netflix is on the, to a certain extent, on the forefront of those changes. I'm not getting paid by Netflix to say that. And let me
No,
explain
no,
you
okay.
let me explain you to even in comparison to a company like Google, for example. If you look at their disclosure program that they have, and it's available on the web, it's public. They will tell you they set condition under which security researchers can disclose security issues to them.
Right.
And assuming you are willing to fulfill those conditions, they are agreeing not to use any kind of regulations or not to disclose your information to any law enforcement policy if you are disclosing security issues to them. I mean,
Right.
the motivation at the end, it would look really bad for Netflix if the security researchers would come out and prove that that it's actually very insecure to use their systems.
Yes. Yes.
And so they are
this is
motivated.
a big thing.
And we're not there yet in the software industry. We're not. It's a sad thing to say, but because if you look at other companies, they're not quite there yet to that point.
So
I had universities. Go ahead.
I'm pretty much mostly with you on what you're saying. I mean, you're right. I mean, we can't have a secure web unless we can do security audits. So security, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest things that the EFF has in their appeal. I saw that they withdrew their appeal last night or this morning, and they're going to refile it next week or something like that. We can get into that later if you want. I'm not sure what the details were on that. Corey was light on that.
Corey was going to be busy for the next week,
Yeah.
and he realized that he wouldn't have the time to take care of it. So we basically advised him, well, if you don't have the time to take care of it, how about you withdraw it and you refile it later on?
Okay, that you know what, that's pretty reasonable. It doesn't sound like any big shady conspiracy theory there. Pretty straightforward.
That was it.
Okay, so since we can't have security. We just can't unless we can do real, proper, combative, multiple people competing in it audits of the security system, of the content, of the code, etc. Why can't the W3C push forward with having a covenant in place? I mean, with that says that security researchers won't be, sued and sent to jail for breaking the DRM and the encryption, which they can currently do in places like Canada and the United States and Australia and a few other places. Why can't there be a covenant in place that says that if they're doing that with EME, we're not going to come after them on those legal grounds? What is the impetus for not having that sort of thing in place? Because without it, there can't be a free and open security audit, because anyone who does the security audit is immediately a criminal, and that's concerning. Anyway.
Yeah, well, if you pay attention, if you looked at our response, I mean, we were pretty clear that we are not recommending at all to use any of those regulations to go after security researcher. For us, it's extremely important that the user privacy and security comes first. And the fact that we have EME is not at all an endorsement on any of those regulations. And we would certainly love for those regulations to be changed. In fact, the EFF itself has been working towards that purpose for several years.
Yeah,
they obtained an exemption to security researchers from the FCC that became into effect last October.
But why? Because ethically, clearly, on those grounds, me and the W3C, we're in lockstep. We agree on that point. But why leave the door open? Why not give that little extra bit of assurance that we have an agreement in place, a covenant in place that says, at least from the W3C standpoint, we will not be taking legal action against security researchers?
He's certainly not going to take any legal action for sure. That you can be guaranteed of.
But unless it's in a covenant, unless it's down in writing, we can't be sure of that. I mean, you seem like a great guy. I don't feel like Tim's going to knock down my door with the Gestapo.
You're talking about W3C. I mean, the question is the companies that are using those technologies, including our members. And first, I mean, I want to make it clear again, we did not get agreement on that. the covenant. One of the issue with the covenant and this debate is who gets to judge what is security research or not. And of course, if you look at the EFF covenant, it says there is no judgment to be applied.
Yeah.
For sure. And while if you talk if you talk to the other side, I would say, they would tell you, well, then if there is no judgment to be applied, it could be anything. Might as well say you can do whatever you want. It would be pretty much the same. And any attempt to shift that needle in one direction or the other fails, because you would need both sides to agree that one particular it's security research, and none of the sides to get a veto power over the others to say this is that this is not. So again, we tried to get consensus around our members, and that did not happen.
Is it public at all what members of the W3C do not want to have those legal protections in place for security researchers?
We are far from that. We have a significant fraction of our members who would like to have such a protection. Unfortunately, we also have a very significant fraction of members who did not agree to the particular wording of the proposed covenant of the EFF, and any attempt to change that wording, unfortunately, failed. So the EFF is one of our members. I would never say just because EME would be a recommendation, it implies that the EFF is agreeing with it.
No,
that would be a leap to do. That would not be appropriate.
What I'm asking is because realistically, if you look out online, this is probably one of the least popular things, period. Right? I put up a poll.
It's the most controversial spec.
It's very controversial. Sure. I put up a poll, and this is a very informal thing. I put up a poll on Twitter, and I said, hey, which of these three things would you like to have happen more? The first one, DRM and EME as a web standard. And I know that the wording there is a little iffy, but the second one, no net neutrality. And the third one is stepping barefoot on top of Legos. 87% was firm, and they would rather step barefoot on top of Legos than have EME be a standard or have no net neutrality. And if you look at, I mean, I
would have probably voted the same way, by the way.
Yes. I mean, right. And that's the thing is, I don't have any feeling like the people at the W3C are some evil corporation or some evil entity with 3 dog heads and they're trying to eat me and breathe fire on me. This one thing really does raise concerns with me for one really big reason. Is beyond, let's put aside my concerns with DRM for a little bit and just put that off to the side. The organizations and the individuals that seem to be the biggest proponents and advocates for a free and open web hate this with their whole soul. I mean, when you see everyone from, you even see the LibreOffice Document Foundation getting in on this. When do they get political on this stuff? I mean, everyone, the FSF, the EFF, me and Corey and The Verge, and everyone is like, no, this stinks. Based on that, who controls at that point then how things become a standard within the W3C? It would suggest to me that things are out of balance, because clearly at this point, at least with this particular standard, it's not a standard that the advocates and proponents of the free and open web want. And so who then wants it? The assumption is evil, greedy corporations. I mean, that's where everyone's minds immediately go. I don't know that that's necessarily even what I think, but something is clearly out of whack. It feels like this is so out of step with W3C's goals. I mean, it is in clear violation of the mission statement of W3C even. So how does it get to this point?
So the mission of W3C is to lead the web to its full potential. The fact is, you did a poll about, is DRM evil or not? And of course, the answer is yes, it is evil. As I said at the beginning, the user experience related to those systems could be very frustrating.
Yeah.
So the thing is, what do we want to use to watch those content? And you have individuals such as Research Stallman who are going to tell you, I don't want to watch those content because of the restriction. And that's perfectly fine. But you also have plenty of individuals around this planet who actually says, actually, this is how I want to spend my Saturday night, and go and watch this movie. At a technical level, what kind of solutions can we give them to do so? Now, I'm not saying by that EME is the best ever solution to do so because of its underlying use of DRM system for some of that content. It doesn't mean either that it cannot be replaced tomorrow. I mean, EME, after all, is one extension of the web platform. You have to realize that we're working on more than 200 of those documents in simultaneously. The fact that EME would become a recommendation tomorrow and die a year later is perfectly fine with us. Again, what we want is to bring the web to its full potential. For several times, we made a call to the community at large that we would wish we would have a better alternative that to use those systems.
But the feeling is that this is necessary. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that being able to watch Netflix, I mean, we'll just distill it down to that. Being able to watch Netflix is a necessary thing for the web as a platform. Because, I mean, clearly, I mean, you, me, everyone opining about this isn't a huge fan of the concept of DRM and having DRM content, but it's felt that it's necessary enough to be able to watch that specific content that we need some sort of implementation for it as a standard.
Necessary? No, you can use. It's not necessary. You have, Netflix existed before EME came along. They were using plugins before on native applications. What we believe is that by providing some integration, relative integration into the web platform, we have a better opportunity to protect users, the ones who do want to use and see that content. I'm not a Netflix customer myself. I don't watch. I don't. Time is short. But I'm not going to judge how people want to entertain themselves. And there are the things that worry us the most nowadays is the tracking happening on the web, and it gets even worse when you go into native platforms. Whether it's desktop applications or native apps on phones. I don't know if you install on phone nowadays, but it's becoming very horrible.
Very, very horrible. Can I pause you momentarily? Because there's a few things that you've said have kind of sparked something in me. I want to ask you a question that comes from Cory Doctorow. So it's not going to be pro EME at this point, but I think it makes a kind of an interesting argument here. So when you were talking about creating EME as giving the W3C and all of us perhaps a little better chance of controlling the experience, maybe ensuring privacy a little better and security a little better if DRM implementations are existing. Okay. So here's a message I got from Cory yesterday. So the theoretical concept of convening a W3C working group to create a standard way for the government to break into citizens' browsers, bear with me, would enable conduct permitted under law, just like with DRM, reduce the likelihood of abuse, just like with what EME does, and create a standard, well-understood means of spying on people. It has every benefit that standardizing DRM has, making something that's bad for the web, at least from people like me and Corey's standpoint, is an existential threat to the web from me and Corey's standpoint. And it makes it a little bit better. It would because we already know that, say, spying occurs on people's machines. So the W3C getting involved and saying, let's make a standard wrapper by which government agencies can spy on people would allow for this. And I know that's crazy. I know that's an intense idea. I know.
Yes.
But technically, the same arguments for EME apply to such a standard of spying on people. So why would that be bad, but doing EME is good? And if doing EME is good, where does that end? Is it, does it end with DRM, or does it continue on to other things that might not be a positive for the web, might be a negative, but maybe we could make it a little bit better by standardizing on it? Where does that go?
If you look at the EME specification, you will see that it's actually, in terms of security and privacy, those sections at the longest that you have of any other specification. The group spent a lot of time around those issues, trying to figure this out, and trying to prevent those underlying systems to do anything. Now, in practice, this code is running on your computer, and it's extremely difficult to provide those guarantees.
Sure.
One of the things that Tim Berners-Lee did towards the end was to ask, after having additional discussion and being concerned about what the system can do, it asked the working group to provide further clarification of what the system can or cannot do, because prior to that, it was very difficult to find that in the specification. For example, the specification is really clear that any communications happening between the outside world through the network interface, and those systems can only happen by going through the browsers and must not happen in any different ways. Was already in the spec, but it was very, it was lost in the middle of it. It was very difficult to find it. So what was added very late into this specification is to make it very clear about what the DRM system can or cannot do, such as, no, you're not allowed to crawl your entire hard drive and to find information that are completely unrelated to the purpose of just playing the content.
But without the ability to safely do the security research on that, we can't actually know that it's working.
Well, and
I think that comes down to the EFF's primary objection, and so me personally, if I were the EF, I'd be standing up on top of a hill and thumping my chest saying no DRM, no. But I feel like EMF's objection is a little more specific, and it's you cannot do under the current setup adequate security research around this system. So therefore, I want to make it very clear. We don't recommend organizations to use those regulations to go after security research. But you leave the door open for the W3C to take legal action against people, unless you don't. It doesn't state that you won't.
It's not W3C. You're saying organization outside W3C.
I'm saying organizations outside the W3C and the W3C, because without having. We have made it clear that we do not recommend using those regulations.
I can guarantee you, and I don't need to talk to Tim about that we would never do such an action ourselves. We have no interest at all in doing such this. What is the most important is that, and you have to realize that our general technical architecture group, the one in charge of reviewing the entire architecture of the web, was made clear that the priority is to protect the user and the privacy. So you would not find us on the side of preventing security research around those systems. Now,
that's not a legal guarantee, though. That's the problem. Unless there's a legal guarantee, there's a huge problem there for security research.
We are technical organizations. You have to realize that those legislation all around the world would take an enormous amount of time and effort to change. It's not just about the DMCA within the US, but you also have the WIPO treaties at the international level.
Yes,
I mean, speaking of France, they also have those regulations. We talked to some of those organizations who were like, we don't like the DRM system, and we tell, and one of our message to them was like, great, how can you help in terms of changing those regulations? Our impact on regulation is very limited. Most of the work that we've done in the past has been focusing on accessibility and ensuring proper access.
I totally get what you're saying.
Proper access on that, and there are protections built in some of the regulation for that, by the way.
Yes. But again, I don't expect the W3C to come in and clean up America's regulation issues. We've got some regulations that are real problems in this regard, and that has nothing, very little, if anything, to do with the W3C.
Yes.
However, you seem like a really nice dude. Tim Berners-Lee. If Tim Berners-Lee came down the street and said, "Hey, Brian, looking good today," I'd probably faint. I have a very high regard for many of the W3C members, for the W3C as a whole.
Thank you.
Eventually, you retire. Eventually, Tim retires, and I want the W3C to continue without having concrete legal protections in place for things like security research, for things like things that are covered under fair use, but most importantly to me, the security research. The next people in line, I don't know who those will be, and I don't know that they'll be nice. I don't know that they're going to be awesome people like you or like Tim. I don't know that that's the case. And unless it's written down and it's a ratified thing that the organization adheres to, then there's no legal guarantees. There's no legal protections. And this could be a huge problem.
Again, we did put in the record that we recommend not to use those regulations. Now, if we were going to take an urgent position, we would go against our own recommendation, which would be a little bit awkward from the point of view of the public.
But doable. There's no legal protection there. I keep thinking again, you're the W3C, yes, man. I mean, you may not be a billion-person organization with $1 trillion at your disposal, but you have such amazing gravitas, such amazing pedigree. You are critically important. And if there are members of the organization, business members, whether Microsoft, Netflix, whoever, Google, any of them, if there are members, you have the ability and the opportunity to persuade them to sign on to such legal protections. And you could easily come at them and say, look, if you want to be part of the W3C, if you want to be on that part of that going forward, this is something we're going to have to all get behind and sign on to. I mean, the reality is, in most of those companies, maybe not all, but most of them are going to go, yeah, you know what? It's worth it. Even if we in our business practices love DRM and want to cuddle with it at night, it's still worth it to us to allow security researchers without suing them or something like that. It just seems like there's that power there.
And there's certainly some of that power for sure, with some limitations. I mean, we're not an enforcement agency at the end. All of our recommendations are voluntary. We don't enforce what we do, what implementers choose to implement or not. I mean, I wish that wasn't the case, because then we would have maybe better interop on the web, but that's not the case. And we haven't given up entirely on providing a better solution from a legal perspective, for sure. I mean, as I said earlier, we provided some security guidelines, best practices guidelines, for example, that did not receive support, but and we're going to keep trying to a certain extent. We need to have, it needs to be a discussion with all of the parties, and we have, again, we have companies like Microsoft and Netflix in the consortium. We also have companies like the EFF as well. And we'll continue to.
I appreciate that. I'd like to make a public request, and I know you can ignore this completely. I would love dearly for things to be more open and transparent in these conversations and in these votes, because the reality is, right now, from the outside, with the lack of transparency, and there's a huge lack of transparency, I don't know what's going on. and it looks like a select few organizations are pushing and influencing their power unduly. That may be the case, that may not be the case, but I have zero way of knowing that unless things are public and open. And it seems to me that with as open as the W3C is or should be, having at the very least the results of those votes be made public is a no-brainer. And I would posit that any organization that doesn't want those votes public has something to hide, because this is an open standards organization, right?
Yeah. So first, I mean, the record of the discussion within the working group are public.
They are?
Yes, the records of the discussion within the working group are public.
Are the votes public?
So we don't do votes. What you're talking about is the last step of our process, where we ask, or what we call our advisory committee, to review the document, and they give input to that. And you're right on that, where we don't make that input public, except that if there is dissent expressed within that input, our response to that dissent becomes public.
Okay.
And that's what you saw actually happening recently.
Right.
We actually published the dissent, a short summary of the dissent, and our response to that dissent public. I mean, we've been moving towards being more and more open over the years. Now, all of our groups are being public. I mean, from a platform perspective, in fact, we've been moving to use a GitHub platform, for example, very often.
At the end, so just so I and everyone watching understands. So let's say the EME is a standard. We've got the document. What is the final step in terms of who has to approve it and agree on it before it becomes an official W3 standard? Does the whole of the membership get a vote of some kind?
No.
Is there just like, does Tim pull out his knight sword and make it so? Like, how does that work?
So at this point, we did the last step of the process, which we ask our members to review the document and express an opinion about it.
Okay.
As we said, we received several objections to this document moving forward to recommendation. Yeah. And the directors, after looking at all of that, suggesting some changes to the specification, and still decided to move forward with the publication of the document as a recommendation. Now, what you saw Corey do yesterday or the day before, time flies, is that our process.
It's been a busy week.
Our process do allow our members to appeal those decisions.
Okay.
And while for practical reason, the EFF decided to temporarily withdraw their appeal, they intend to refile it
next week.
as soon as possible. So now, if you're going to ask me, when are you guys publish the document as a recommendation? My answer is going to be, knowing and assuming that this appeal process go through, it's difficult to predict at the moment.
Have there been a lot of are appeals a normal thing with W3C standards?
No, we had very rare occasions where those appeals were happening. In fact, we never had a successful appeal going through so far. It required a certain level of support with the other members here, and then
technically it doesn't require any support from the members. It's just the directors that decide, right?
No, that step already happened. It's regarding the appeal is different, because this time it's one member asking to reject decision done by the director.
Okay.
That's the process that EFF will start when they start refiling.
And so does that go to the membership then? Does the membership get some sort of vote or say on that appeal?
Yes, they get to express. Whether this appeal can go through or not. It's actually publicly documented in our process.
Okay. Okay, so
I will spare you for your sanity the details of what that process is
I know
going to be.
bureaucratic processes can get a little bit intense.
But
I guess
if you
what I'm
want a
looking
pointer
at,
to it, I will be happy to provide it to you.
Okay, all right. Well, so let's back up. I mean, we'll watch that unfold over the next week. I'm sure there will be additional fireworks and drama involved with that.
Yes.
Okay. I want to come back to one very, very high level thing. And that is, and we've touched on this a bit, but I kind of want to narrow down on this real specifically before we end here. And that is scope. So the W3C has, creates an open web, right? And like the W3C's mission statement here. And I wanted to read this part to you specifically.
We want to create an open web platform. So when you say open web, I'm not sure what you mean.
Yes, an open web platform. That really is it. On your mission statement page, you have a section right at the top called the Web for All. And it reads, the first part of it, the social value of the web is that it enables human communication, commerce, and opportunities to share knowledge. One of W3C's primary goals is to make these benefits available to all people, whatever their hardware, software, network infrastructure, native language, culture, geographic location, or physical or mental ability. Wonderful.
Yes.
We're all on the same page. I'm pretty sure 100% of everyone watching, including you, we're all on the same page there. That's awesome. DRM, by its very definition, goes against several of those things. That's just the definition of it. So by standardizing on it, the W3C is then in the business of is the wrong way to put it, but they are now in the practice of standardizing on mechanisms for control and prohibition of users to meet those exact things in the mission statements. How is that something that is in scope for what the W3C does? How is that not wildly out of scope for your core mission?
Again, we believe the web is for everyone, and if you want to make money out of the content that you're publishing on the web, you should be perfectly free to do that. Now, because you're doing that, your content may not be as free and open as other content. I mean, there are paywalls and so on.
Sure.
And therefore, your business may not be as successful as others. But we want to make sure that the web is for everyone. And those everyone is an industry in a movie industry who also would like their content to be available to many potential customers as possible.
Yes, sort of. So technically, though, that jumps over one critical step, and that is saying that the end user should be able to be restricted by, say, a content provider who is not interested in investigating other alternatives. It kind of looks like the W3C is just
again,
going, we'll implement this, even though it's not free and open. I'm very confused by that.
I mean, so are you saying that we should not have paywalls on the web?
No, not at all. In fact, I am very, very open and flexible for anyone who wants to do a business in whatever way they want, including having DRM if they want. I am full freedom for everyone to conduct their business how they want to do it. From the W3C standard, as soon as you make a technology and a standard, that specific purpose is to enable broad usage of DRM, which is what the EME is for. That specifically is there to break at least 3 of the items in the Web for All section of the W3C's mission statement. That
I can imagine plenty of techniques to do so. I can imagine plenty of techniques to do so. Again, our concern was not about providing those restrictions. Our concern was can we, despite those restrictions, can we provide the best experience as possible to those users who do want to access that content? Again, there are browsers where you are allowed to deactivate the DRM system, and nothing is forcing you, even when you implement EME, to use any of those systems. You don't have to disable EME from your browser just because you don't like DRM. All you have to do is to disable the underlying DRM system.
Right.
So our goal was that those users can still use the web platform to access this content. Now, this is not necessarily a support of the DRM and especially the regulation around it, far from it. But our goal was to enable the use case for it so that you can actually access the content. The alternative, as far as we can see it, is that to tell those users, you cannot use the web to access this content. This part of your entertainment is not part of the web, sorry. And that's what makes us stop to say, well, we need to find a way to provide them a better experience for that. Now, I'm not claiming that, again, that EME is going to be the one and final experience.
Sure.
If it gets replaced next year, more wins for everyone, as far as I know. I'm also not claiming that EME is the only way to restrict access to that content. I mean, we have other APIs such as the Web Crypto API that you can use to make it really difficult for the users to access the content in any way they want. I mean, for images, we had photo websites where they're trying to prevent as much as possible for you to download the content and use it in any kind of shape or form. But what is important for us was that to provide a better alternative to what we have, to what we used to have before.
Right. Pulling away from, but see, now there's the thing is, it feels like it's two step forwards, one step back in a lot of ways. Because if we've got EME as sort of, we could view it as like the framework that additional DRM implementations can exist within, then we've still got a bunch of, closed code that it's illegal for us to even look at running anyway, which we could already opt out of before. So in many ways, there's no new benefit for end users. There's potential there for new benefit. So like if we have the EME and we had a covenant where we could say flat out the W3C and member organizations are not going to sue security researchers for looking for security problems, then we could point to a benefit, even for people like me who aren't a big fan of DRM, right? I could still point at that and say, well, DRM's not great. Yes, this does seem like a step back to me, but at least people who are using it now are potentially a little bit more secure. But without those agreements in place, there's the potential for a more secure system, but we don't actually get it because we can't do the security research on it. So what would be the point in the first place?
Again, I mean, there is always more we can do in that space, for sure. And as the EFF noted, there are some of the areas where we can do more into it. The thing is when you say there is no new benefit to the users, well, I would disagree with that. Because again, we compare that to not having nothing. We compare that to the user prior to that being forced to use a plugin.
But they still kind of are using a plugin. I mean, it's just something, they're using a bit of closed code inside EME.
They are certainly still using an extension, which is classified, could be for some classified as a plugin.
It's a plugin, yeah.
But the cover of what that plugin can do or get to do is a lot more narrow than what those plugins used to be able to do. Before, Flash and Silverlight, those kind of plugins, they were the entire platform right there, and you were able to write whatever code you wanted and run that code on the user. You don't get to run code through EME at all. EME is very restricted in how it can be used as well. It can only be used for video content. You cannot use it to restrict the use of HTML, for example.
Oh, now that's an interesting bit. So the only thing EME can be used for is video, period, end of story?
At the moment, yes. And there is no talk to extend it further.
Okay. So period,
It's the way
just
that
videos.
it's built in the architecture of the specification. Yes, it's an extension of the HTML video element.
It looked like it would be, just looking through it, it looked like it'd be pretty easy to extend images, any sort of binary content and the like. I mean, it looked like the reality is it's looking at things like, let's say, just JavaScript, right? If you create some JavaScript and you create it in a lab and you create it and it's like, okay, I don't think this can be exploited. This isn't going to be used for any way that's I don't like. And then it gets out in the wild and some really gnarly JavaScript gets created and people start using JavaScript in horrible ways that produce just bloated, awful websites. How, regardless of what EME is intended for, it's going to get used well beyond the original scope of the W3C of what they intended. That always is the case. It's never not the case.
Yes, I mean, that was the case from day one when he had some vision of the web, and when it got deployed to the world, that vision was morphed. The fact is, at the moment, it is given the architecture of EME, it is a pure extension only targeted for video. Now you can use it to, you can take a still image and make it a video if you want to. For sure. I'm not sure from an experience point of view it will be beneficial.
That's a great experience, but it's doable though. It's
plus on the bandwidth, and plus on the bandwidth, it's going to be pretty bad on top of it. So
I don't know that the companies care much about that. They're already making gigantic websites that are insanely sized. So that's a whole other thing.
Well, that's a whole other topic, because that's also a topic that we are looking into. And the fact that one of the remarks that I hear a lot is advertisement on the web is a big culprit for the cause of lack of performance.
Right. It gets rough.
And we're still trying to crack that one.
This has actually been somewhat helpful for me, because I like that we've been able to have a nice open chat. I mean, clearly we're not on the same page on most things, but I think you and I kind of agree on some, and that's good. That's a start.
And I think the simple fact that you can talk to me about this was also a good improvement, because when some of those companies approach us to say, hey guys, we have this proposal. Is that something that could be done within W3C? And one of the consideration, and I don't think we made that clear into all of our communication, was to say, is it better to tell them to go somewhere else, or to do that within W3C with all of the controversy around it? It's not like we would not think that we would get controversy around it, but still have as an open conversation as possible around it. We were concerned for like open source projects such as the Mozilla one. Will they get a chance to be at the table and discuss the pros and cons if it is done somewhere else? And that was a concern for us. And despite the fact that, this specification has been taking a lot of our time compared to others that are, in my opinion, far more important for the future of the web. But despite that was one of our motivation in doing it, in terms of giving the ability to have to organizations such as the EFF to be at the table and have those discussions in the open as much as possible. And I don't think the conversation is stopped.
No, this conversation's only getting going. And
yes.
All right. So we're at a point now. I think the world is really divided in two, with the people who are kind of pro EME over here, which is very, very, very small group, and everyone else over here. Realistically,
I think that the reality is actually different. We have certainly a community which is anti-DRM, and
it's
which
not
is
just
very
the community
vocal.
that's anti-DRM. It's the community that's anti the W3C doing things relating to DRM. Because for me, I'm like, if Microsoft or Netflix said, I've got a new DRM implementation, you know what? I'm not even going to cover it on my show. I probably won't write an article about it, because it's not necessarily relevant to me. Even as an advocate against pushing away DRM, it's okay if they do that. But when it's like if the EFF came out and said, you know what we like? Domestic wiretapping without a warrant. We're pretty big on that now. It would make my head explode. And that's the position I'm at with the W3C right now. It seems so far out of character and scope.
The adoption, again, I mean, we are looking at a various set of features. The fact that this feature is controversial doesn't mean that we should not look at it at all.
I agree with that totally.
And again, whether you and I like it or not, the use case is still there. And until someone provides a better solution, we're going to have to still face that debate. But the adoption of the EME specification has been great. Again, because it provides a way better alternative to all of the other solutions that comes prior to that. It narrowed down the issue as narrowly as possible, for sure, and it does bring the conversation more and more into the open as well. But you said, you know, all the set of people supporting EME is very narrow. That's not true in my experience. When I was talking to this case of like, what can we do about it? From day one, when the talks about video has been happening back in the mid-2000s, that people were asking me those questions from day one. So I would not claim that the set of the EME supporters is very narrow. They are certainly less vocal because maybe they are busier watching those movies
maybe. I don't know, man. I bet you right now, if we did a broad poll across the world and gave people two options, what do you think the W3C should be standardizing on? One, EME and having a DRM solution, or two, making the HTML blink tag come back and enforcing it on all websites so every bit of text blinks uncontrollably forever. I guarantee you at least 80% of the people would say make the web blink. Make HTML blink tag go crazy.
That's because they would have a poor understanding of EME again.
I don't know that's true, man.
Having EME, because they would assume that having EME means that they have to support a DRM system, and that correlation is not automatic.
Again, 87% of people I surveyed would rather step bare feet on Lego pieces. This is not, and it's not just that it's unpopular. It's that it gets under the skin of some of the loudest people who literally write and talk for a living. I mean, people like me and Cory Doctorow and Richard Stallman and everyone, we're just going to stand up no matter how annoying we can be. And we're going to not stop talking about this. And it is going to be, I know. And the thing is, neither I can't speak for everyone, but I'm pretty confident, you know, like Cory Doctorow and everyone, we don't want to just sit around and be a thorn in people's sides. We want to productively work towards something good. So with that in mind, I want to end on a very simple question that is not controversial in my mind at all. What can people like me or average people watching this, reading articles about this do if they feel passionate about it, one way or the other? Who can they contact to make a real effective difference? Should they be reaching out to member companies that are members of the W3C? What is the most effective way to voice their concern or approval?
I mean, in terms of regulation, there's certainly support efforts such as the EFF, or contact the representative in the various governments to do so. Because, you know, putting security researcher in jail using the regulation is something that no one wants to do, or should be able to do it.
If nobody wants to do it, that's on the W3C, that's involved with the W3C, it would be written down. Somebody wants to do it, otherwise it would not be written down. Otherwise, it would be written down.
The problem is how do you define security research? And
make it broad. Go the EFF's route and just make it broad. And if let's say a particular company doesn't like that, let that company come forward and publicly make their case for why that's a bad idea. And if they're right, if it truly is a bad idea to do that, then everyone will go, oh, that was a logical argument they made.
Talking to your representative would be a good thing. Or you can go the Richard Stallman way, I would say, which is, well, you should refuse to use those DRM system.
Yeah.
And make those companies. As I said, I'm not a Netflix customer myself. I'm not saying that everyone should become a Netflix customer by far. I'm like Richard Stallman to a certain extent. I don't even have a television at home. I love
my TV, man. You pry the TV from my cold dead hand. So I understand. I really do understand all the arguments on all sides of it. I feel like there is a disconnect. And I would like for things to be a little bit more transparent, because they really don't feel transparent at this point. Because like right now, we're seeing this happening, and now clearly the concept of having a legal guarantee that the member companies won't sue security researchers, that's clearly a nerve-wracking point. That is a point that obviously has contention within the W3C.
Yes.
I'd clearly, like, it made you a little nervous when we brought it up. Like, and I don't mean to be to harp on that, but it's clear from everyone I've spoken to that that's a real contentious thing. If it's contentious, that means that there's organizations that want to be able to sue researchers. That's really what that means. And unless, I mean, because now, and we can waffle on it a bit, but unless the companies and organizations and the members of the W3C come out and publicly say, I'm against putting those protections in place within the standard, I'm against putting a covenant in place, and here's my reasons. Honestly, in light of that, I just kind of have to assume that they want to be able to sue people who crack it for fair use, for security restrictions and whatnot. Otherwise, they'd be public and open about it. If their intentions are good and noble, you're open and public. So I would like to see that.
They don't want to lose those rights, which are not necessarily good rights that they have, but they certainly don't want to lose those rights.
But that means that they're doing something wrong, though, is what that means. If they feel like they shouldn't be allowed to have those rights, it's kind of sneaky, but they want them anyway. That means that they are doing something harmful knowingly. That means that they know they're hurting people. So I say, let them come out and make a statement. Change the W3C's approach. All communication open. Period. Going forward.
So these again,
public mailing list.
The deliverable of the working group. The deliverables of the working groups are completely open. They're on GitHub and on the public list. It's a few of those companies have been making mistakes in the past, and they use those regulations and the public opinions against them. I hope that taught them a lot of lessons to not do so. Again, we do recommend not to use those regulations and to make sure that we protect users for their privacy and security. And we'll keep saying so for sure. I cannot imagine W3C doing otherwise, especially that given the controversy around this topic. And I don't think it's over either. My hope is that we can continue the conversation, even if the recommendation at the end do get released. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. There are some people who would want to be able to, who do want to use those kind of mechanisms for more than just video content. And given the controversy around the topic, it's going to become harder and harder for them to just expect W3C to do so as well. Back in the days, in 2013, for example, the EFF was the only organization within our members expressing oppositions. To their credits, they've been very successful at increasing the opposition and are forcing as forcing more and more of debate to happen as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think the debate is over. My goal is to keep encouraging to have that debate. The thing that would be really sad for, and I speak with my, as a personal opinion, would be to just tell those companies, just go away, we don't want to hear from you, because certainly we would not have those conversations anymore. And we would be going back into the dark ages of like those companies, will write code the way they want, and we're not having that conversation as much. So my goal is to keep having that conversation. And the reason why I was willing to come and talk to you, despite the fact that life is short, was because I do believe in that conversation.
It's good, and I got to give you props, man. You got cojones. You got cojones. You came on the show. You talked to me and you answered my questions. I don't agree with a lot of your answers. I'll be straight with you, but I really got to give you props for being on here and talking.
Yes, I was not expecting to change your mind necessarily.
No, but
it's a very,
there's a chance.
At the end of the day, when we have to ask Tim Berners-Lee to make the decision, it's never a good thing. It means that we do not have consensus around a specific issue, and that the hard choices are becoming on his desk. And on this one, he spent months and months trying to figure it out himself, and had plenty of conversation, including with EFF, of course, around those topics. It's unfortunate that we were not able to come up with a better common agreement on that. And I really hope we're going to keep going with continue the conversation for sure.
Honestly, what I would love to do, where is there a good centralized spot where I can go and read the comments from the members on the spec, on the EME proposal? Like, is that on GitHub somewhere? Is on the W3C website?
Yes, the GitHub issues list of the specification itself will contain a lot of those comments. Like the EFF ones, for example, will be there. If you read the disposition of comment that we sent back on July the 5th, I believe, will also, while it doesn't copy verbatim the comment as we receive it, it provides a very rough list of what the nature of what those comments was about.
Is there anywhere where those comments exist in their entirety?
In their entirety, you mean in the public space? Yeah. No.
Is there any way for me to get a hold of them? And the reason I ask is I think this is an incredibly valuable conversation. And realistically, as a standards body and with members, it would be an interesting thing to sit down and for me, for journalists at various other sites to be able to sit down with the individuals working at those other companies that are member companies and say, okay, so what is your thoughts on this? Why do you support it? Why are you against it? Yada, yada, yada. And really kind of get to the nitty gritty of it.
So in terms of the comments, the ones who provided the most thoughts were the ones who were in dissent of this moving forward. And you will find in the GitHub repository, you will find most of them, if not all of them.
Is it fair to say that if we don't find a dissenting opinion from them, that organization gave a big thumbs up on the EME proposal or spec? Because not at all. That's where I'm getting to is I don't know really where to start from a practical standpoint. How do I get a hold of the right people at these organizations who interact with the W3C, who read through these specifications and comment on them? Because these are the individuals and these are the organizations that the public needs to be able to talk to.
Again, you have the list of organizations who are participating in the working group. That is public. The discussion within the working groups are also. And some of them are on GitHub, some of them are on a public mailing list. So all you have to do is to look at those lists, and you will find, obviously, if the organization was within the working group.
Is the mailing list on w3.org?
Yes, on our mailing list server.
Okay.
I can give you a pointer later on. Perfect. I can give you a pointer later on if you want to on that. That's very easy. I mean, and if you look at the spec, they are linked from the specification, by the way. It's not hidden at all. regarding the organizations during the review that supported, they did not give any specific details.
Sure.
Most of them. I don't think that you would learn most. Why did you support this?
Exactly, and that I think is a valuable thing, because realistically, dude, over the next however many weeks and months, you're not going to see a lot of positive press about any of this. It's bad right now.
Yes.
It's gonna get worse. I without a doubt, it's gonna get worse, and that's not even relating to me, right? It's just noticing what's out there, knowing the organizations that are upset about this. So having the ability to sit down casually, breathing, and us talking to the organizations that are supportive of this as a standard. Maybe we all won't be able to change each other's minds, but at least we can all come to a point where we understand where people are coming from, where these companies are coming from. Because right now, it looks, and this is not even my point, this is literally hundreds and hundreds of messages I've gotten in the last 24 hours alone on this, have all been the W3C is bought off by specific corporations in order to push DRM related standard. That's the public perception, not even relating to what I think and say. And that public perception is not going to go away at all. In fact, it's going to get worse, a lot worse, because the EFF, when they're doing their official appeal process, that means we're going to hear more from Corey. And man, that boy is good at his words. And the thing is, if you've got, Stallman and Corey and me and everyone else beating the battle drums against this, the W3C
so we have again
so
we
intense.
Also have yes I understand that some people likes to be loud, and I expect them to continue.
It's not
we also
likes
have
to be loud. We feel passionately about the W3C mission statement.
If you prefer to say passionate, that's fine.
This specification goes against.
What you will see is that that specification is also getting support as well. You will see some of it if we get to release a recommendation. You will see some of it in some of the testimonials that will go along the specification as well. Yes, again, it's a good thing that the conversation will continue to happen. By the way, talking about Richard Stallman, you have to realize that his office is like 2 doors away from where I am sitting right now.
That's great.
We've been having one-to-one conversation about it many times already.
Yes, and I'm sure, and having had many conversations with Richard over the years, I know how those go.
And I will still welcome him in my office to talk about it for sure.
Yes, all right. You know what? I really do appreciate you coming on. I am sitting in an almost less convinced position that this is a good idea at this point. But I do also feel more informed, and I do feel like I have a little bit better of an understanding about your process and about your mindset and going into this, which I think is a good thing. We don't want to demonize each other. We're all nerds, right? I mean, you and I are both nerds, and nerds in general kind of want the same things, even if we're on the different side of one particular issue. So I do appreciate that. I will post this up. People will talk, and we'll see where things go. When the EFF officially posts their appeals, I would be very interested in seeing how that goes. I would request very humbly, knowing that I have no power over the W3C whatsoever, that appeals process be as open as possible. Because looking at it, knowing that there has never been a successful appeal, and appeals aren't exactly a commonplace thing. And from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like there's a big system in place where we can say, count the hanging chads afterwards for how the appeal went. I would request that it be as open as possible. So that way, if the appeal isn't successful, at least people like me can have a good feeling in our hearts that at least the W3C not only really effectively considered it, but put it to a vote to the entirety of its members, put it out there so everyone had actual input, considering it's such a critical standard. I would really, really like to see that. So if possible, the more open you guys can make it, the better, because we're all going to be following it like a hawk. And if it's not really open, we're simply going to assume the worst, because that's how we as humans work. So please make it as open as you can. You know, it's just the way it is.
I will certainly attempt to do so for sure.
I appreciate it. And if you guys have any thoughts on how to make it open, reach out. Behind the scenes, off the record, I will do whatever I can on that. I do just want to see it be open.
I understand. Yes. One of the reasons why we keep the idea of continual improvement of the W3C, some things that we work on an everyday basis. So we'll continue to try to make the W3C works better for everyone, for sure. Good. And the web as well, for what is worth.
Good. And once you're done with this, though, seriously, I'm pretty confident if you replace the HTML blink tag, it would be more popular than EME. So go ahead and add that in, and
well, you would raise a lot of concern from the accessibility community by doing so. So I would not recommend you to pursue that path.
The EME is already adding accessibility problems, though.
No, not at all. Not at all. Actually, it's improving the situation. Even Corey recognized that.
But
if you read its text carefully.
Anyway, you know what? We've talked for a while. I think we could disagree on every minutia here for quite some time. Thank you again, Philip. I really do appreciate it. I'd high five you and give you a big old bro hug for coming on, knowing that you were kind of walking a little bit into the lion's den.
Yes,
seriously,
I understand.
Man. Power to you, man. That takes some guts. I
have to say, no one forced me to do so.
Right?
There is no one standing next to me with a stick to say, you're going to have to do this.
Sir Tim's not standing with a sword right next
to
you,
at all.
threatening decapitation. Does Tim have a sword? Just as a side note, being as he is a knight, does he have a sword?
Not as far as I know, but, I didn't go into his home to check.
The funny thing is, and I've thought about this, if I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Tim, I've never talked with Tim before, that would be the first question I'd ask him is, 1, do you got a sword? 2, horse? 3, armor. Like, what? I don't really, the web is interesting. Fancy, man. Let's talk about the nerdy stuff later. You're a knight.
I will. I will recommend to him that he should do some training first before acquiring those things.
I would like to see pictures of Tim at a Ren fair. That would be fantastic. Anyway, thank you again, man. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let the entire internet devour this and yell at it one way or the other. I hope this has at least helped get your perspective out there a little bit. We'll see how that goes. So good luck surviving the internet onslaught over the next few weeks, my friend.
Thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye.